to another subject, January 6th and election integrity and domestic terrorism and those kind of things. Now I was surprised when Mr. Langford said that he was going to stand up on the Senate floor and object to the Electoral College vote, which pleasantly surprised, by the way. But then when the riot occurred, not an insurrection, it was a riot, and it looks like it was instigated. And I'm only laughing because it's ironic, not because it's not a serious subject. It is a serious subject. I'm really angry about that riot happening because it caused things like weak people that have no spine, like Mr. Langford, to do something that he did, which is he withdrew his objections and he declined to speak on the floor of the Senate about those objections. And a lot of other Republicans did too. Matter of fact, they all did, in my opinion. And then we, of course, got the Electoral College vote counted and approved that night. You know, so where are you at on election integrity and what Langford did as opposed to what he should have done, which is stood in the breach and stayed in there and said, no, this isn't terrorism or insurrection. It's a riot. And it was probably
So,
caused
yeah.
by government provocateurs.
So on all of that, on January 6th, for those that don't know, Senator Langford was giving a speech on the Senate floor when the riot happened, when the Capitol was breached, and so they shut down the session. And he previously to that, he had said he was going to vote against certifying the Electoral College votes, at least in certain states, because that is what the majority of Oklahomans want. The vast majority of Oklahomans, including especially Republicans, but other Oklahomans as well. And so it wasn't just a partisan thing. The majority of Oklahomans wanted that. So he was under immense pressure to vote against certifying the election. What it appears is that he was looking for a reason or an excuse to not do that. Now, he had publicly said he was going to vote against certifying the election. Then the riot happened. They came back into session. He said, well, now because this happened, I'm just going to go ahead and vote to certify the election, which is what he ended up doing. So a lot of people say he flip-flopped on that, or as you said, it seemed like he didn't have the backbone to actually stand up. The truth is, with the Electoral College vote, the Constitution says that the state legislators set the method for choosing electors, and we saw in numerous states that that was violated. We saw states where the ballots had to be postmarked by a certain day, and a judge happened. And on January 6th, I was actually giving a speech at the Oklahoma State Capitol, and I said if I was in Washington, D.C., I would vote against certifying the election because they didn't follow the constitutional parameters. So I would have stayed consistent in that. I would have voted against certification. On election integrity overall, absolutely, I support the calls for a forensic audit. I've actually filed a bill here in the state of Oklahoma to do a forensic audit of our elections. I've called for more election security measures, even though Oklahoma has done voter ID and we have secured some things. But a lot of this is issues that has to be fixed at the federal level. Because, if Oklahoma has voter ID and Colorado keeps doing universal mail-in voting and continues to cheat in that way, that it dilutes or steals away from the votes of the people of Oklahoma that are doing it the right way. So I have been a constant supporter of election integrity. In fact, after the November election, within 3 weeks, I filed several election integrity bills to try to rein in the out of control issues, even in other states. And so I've been working on this for before anybody else, before it even became popular to talk about it, because I've seen it. I mean, having lived overseas, I know that old adage from, I think it was Stalin, that said, I don't care who votes, I care who counts the votes. And so we know that.
Exactly. Exactly. That there are three issues outside of the constitutional issue, and that's the most important one. Why the Electoral College vote really should not have been certified, and the proposal for Vice President Pitts to not not count those votes, but to ask those states to take another look at them because of these judicial decisions that were extra constitutional. That is perfectly within the deliberative process of their electoral college. I know we like instant stuff in this country today, but if you had asked a founder, I guarantee you, a writer of the Constitution would have said, absolutely, sure. If there's a question in a state as to the method of the choosing of those electors, and if it was against the constitutional requirement, then that state's votes should be looked at again and questioned to ensure that those electoral college votes either can be counted properly, or whether there should be another election, or whether they should be thrown out. That's a deliberative constitutional process, and vice presidents are not ceremonial in that, in my opinion. And that's the most important reason why I think that people like Lankford should have gone ahead and objected to this electoral college vote. And all that they've done, really, Nathan, is allow these Democrats and leftists, and I just call them communists now. They're American communists, have been able to have their what's called a Reichstag moment, where the same situation where Hitler used the burning of the Reichstag to take over the entire government. The Democrats are trying to do that too, using their select committee, and they've got some collaborators like Liz Cheney and little Adam Kinzinger, who I'm embarrassed to say is part of the U.S. Air Force that I served in for 33 years. And it's a complete farce. It's extra constitutional. It has been given powers that are not supposed to be in the legislative branch. And it's a complete farce. And they're making a farce of the investigation. I don't know if you saw that Kinzinger came out defending Ray Epps, who's the only American citizen on tape January 5th and 6th telling people to go into the Capitol. And he's doing it from Capitol grounds on January 6th. So he's breaking the law, but Kinzinger has the guts to say he's not breaking the law, and we appreciate him coming to talk to us. Well, I call bullshit on that. The FBI, all kinds of other law enforcement and intelligence operations had to have been going on around this incident. And my question for you, and I ask this of everybody now that's going to the federal Congress, is will you take some action to try to file a bill to force communications between the senior legislative decision makers, like the Speaker of the House and law enforcement and Homeland Security and all of those things, when it comes to the security of the Capitol, to be forced to be able to be made public record? Because right now you can't do a Freedom of Information Act request for that information, and they won't release it. And that's how the Capitol Police are withholding 14,000 hours of videotape that shows for a fact that it was not an insurrection, that most of these people were peaceful, and likely shows that the police were using brutal tactics, and that may have even caused the death of at least one woman, and did cause the death of another woman, who were unarmed, peaceful protesters by the standard of 2020 anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been a huge advocate for transparency since I've been in the Oklahoma State Legislature. In fact, I filed a transparency bill, a government accountability bill, that our our former governor, who was a Republican, but she was a rhino, she actually vetoed the bill 3 times. It passed overwhelmingly in the legislature. It's about transparency. She vetoed it 3 times. I kept running it. We got a new governor. I got it passed, and it's brought some real transparency to Oklahoma. So I am all about government transparency and accountability. These people are supposed to work for us, so we should be able to see what they are doing behind the scenes. So I fully support that. I agree with you on I heard it referred to the other day as the Fedsurrection, because that's, I mean, there's evident video footage out there and different things that would make it appear. And just the fact that so many of the people that were involved have not been charged, that obviously there's some sort of connection or protection by the feds. I was doing an interview the other day with I don't want to call him a journalist, because that's not what he was, because of the way he proposed his questions, but he was somebody in the media. And he said, well, there's hours of footage that show that these people are guilty. And I said, well, and there's, thousands of hours of footage that have not been released that could show that they're innocent. And he's like, well, that's ridiculous. We have it on footage, on video footage. You can see exactly what happened. I said, well, if you want to make that argument, I said, obviously prosecutors will edit footage. They will use select clips of footage, because we just saw that in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, where that prosecutor was manipulating footage and using select portions of footage to try to prove guilt for somebody that was obviously innocent when we saw all the video footage that was available. So yes, there's thousands of hours of footage that should be released that will show the true picture of what happened on January 6th. It was not an insurrection, absolutely not. It was you could make the claim that it was a riot, but you're going to have to see who started it, who initiated it. Yes, there was some violence. Yes, there were some people that were harmed and injured, but so far, like you said, the one woman that was murdered was unarmed, and it was totally unnecessary that she was shot and killed for her actions or the actions of anybody else on that day. But it seems very apparent that the feds were highly involved in what took place that day and trying to instigate it from the get-go.
Yeah, and I understand. I don't support anybody that broke the law. But Darren Beatty at Revolver News, which is the pieces that you're referring to as far as the Fedsurrection, I think he came up with that. We have to give him credit. He came up with that term, I believe. He actually shows, and so has Tucker Carlson and several other media outlets have shown the video of Ray Epps whispering in a young man's ear at the time that the riot part of this process really started, which was the first removal of police barricades out on the lawn of the Capitol. And that young man that Epps whispered in his ear is the first one, along with one other person, to go up and remove a barricade. So that really gives me question as to what is going on, and we should be able to get access to all communications, because people in the select committee are accusing President Trump of not being responsive, when we know for a fact from Kash Patel, who was the chief of staff for the Department of Defense at the time, that the president made available 20,000 National Guardsmen on that day. We know it for a fact, even though the big media they already are out there trying to say, no, they didn't do that. Well, we know it. So we've got to get access to all that information in every single minute of the video, because there's nothing secret in the Capitol. I've been all over the place, in it, under it, around it. There's nothing secret about their security measures, except for who the hell wrote the policy that a Capitol police officer could shoot a woman in the neck when she's unarmed, even though she is coming through a broken window that she didn't even break. Somebody else beside her broke, and she's surrounded by police officers behind her. Now, I want to see the policy that enables that, but I can't get it because Pelosi says, no, it's a legislative deliberative process and you're not allowed to see that. I understand the legislative process, but we need to be able to see information about the operational control and decision making about the security of that Capitol, especially on that day, and all the communications between all of the officers, regardless of what organization they were from, and between the officers and the political leadership with Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of D.C. All of those things we must see and have access to that, because those text messages are out there. The phone calls are recorded when they come into the command centers. We know that. And we have a right and a responsibility to demand that from our government. And that's why I want to send people like you up to D.C. Let's stay on this subject for just a couple minutes, Nathan. And I want to get your take on the prisoners in what's called the D.C. Gulag. A lady named Julie Kelly from American Greatness has been reporting on the prisoners and the charges extensively for this entire time. And she's really the one responsible for uncovering the inhumane treatment of these prisoners who are being charged with things like trespassing or parading or interrupting a meeting and those kind of things. They're not being charged with violence, a lot of them, and they're being held in pretrial confinement when you have murderers being let out with no bail in this country. And it's incredible. People not getting medical treatment that they need. And I'm not talking about a cut on the hand. I'm talking about cancer and those kind of things, or the medications they need, or on the right diet due to medical reasons. And it's incredible what's happening to these prisoners. Look, I fought the war on terror. I was in the Pentagon on 9/11. I spent my entire last part of my 30-something year career fighting against the Islamists and those kind of things. And I wouldn't have cared if we had treated those prisoners like that, but I couldn't because it's my responsibility to follow the law.
Mhm.
And our own citizens are being treated worse than we treat Islamic jihadist terrorists that have attacked our country. And it's incredible in my mind. And look, again, I'll say it again, I don't support anybody that broke the law. What I support, though, is due process and the appropriate protection of rights and the appropriateness of the fairness of our judicial system, which we appear to have two different standards in. One if you're on the left, and one if you're a believer in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. And it's those of us on that President Biden just said the other day, we're domestic terrorists because we don't agree with vaccine mandates and we don't agree with his election, and we think something was wrong. Where are you at on all that?
So I filed a bill right before the anniversary of January 6th because I knew that the media was going to be pushing this narrative of an insurrection. And so I filed a bill on January 4th saying that here in Oklahoma at the state level, saying I called it the Prohibition on Political Prisoners in Oklahoma Act. And what it would say, it said that none of the January 6th detainees, unless they were charged with a felony, because that would have been the violence aspect if they had attacked a law enforcement officer or something like that. But none of them could be transported through the state of Oklahoma, either over our highways, through our airspace, or anything like that. We were not going to allow that to happen because these are political prisoners. This is a politicized DOJ that is targeting these people because of their political affiliations. This is not about justice. This, like you said, many of these people have been detained for longer periods than what their sentence would be if they were found guilty of whatever that is, that misdemeanor of parading or being in a secure building without permission. Even though, like several of the people have actually been charged with being in a secure facility without permission, even though we know that law enforcement personnel, Capitol Police officers, held the doors open for some of the people entering the building. And yet then they were charged with entering a building and remaining in a secure building that they didn't have access to, even though they were given access by law enforcement personnel. So this absolutely is these are political prisoners. They have been treated terribly in many places. So I'm doing what I can at the state level, saying, okay, we're not going to give you access to our roads. We're gonna stand up as a state and push back on the feds, try to hinder you from investigating any of our citizens here in Oklahoma that might have been involved on January 6th. There are federal prisons and detention facilities here in Oklahoma. We're not going to allow you to transport prisoners through those facilities. So I'm doing what I can to push back and stand up at the state level. There have been some members of Congress and some senators that have stood up at the federal level, but not nearly enough because I've seen what this is. I mean, this is the beginning of that Stasi secret police type of situation where they will come and knock on your door and in the middle of the night, I mean, we've seen it with Roger Stone, no matter where you stand on him, where they tipped off the local or tip off CNN to be there so that they could show this commando style raid and these types of things. This is a politicized DOJ, and it is fundamentally contrary to the principles of liberty and what we were founded on as a country. So I have been very vocal